If you're listening to me right now, it's because I managed to survive the impossible. 12 days. 12 days buried alive under tons of concrete and twisted iron, where the only thing separating me from death was the voice of my 7-year-old daughter calling me through the rubble. A voice that technically was impossible to exist. Hey everyone, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. You won't believe what happened to me in March 2024 in a small town called Karava in Eastern Europe. I was there as part of a humanitarian project, rebuilding schools that had been destroyed by war. I never imagined that I would become part of the rubble I was trying to clear. This is the most difficult story I've ever told. Buckle up, because you're about to discover how a daughter's love can literally move mountains of concrete. My name is David Hawkins. I'm 38 years old, a civil engineer from Seattle, Washington. I've always been a practical person. If you know me, you know that I don't believe in the supernatural, miracles, or anything that can't be explained by physics and mathematics. This skepticism almost cost me my life. I've worked for international NGOs for 15 years, specializing in post-conflict reconstruction. I've been to Afghanistan, Syria, Gaza, and other places where war has left nothing but rubble. My specialty is assessing the structural integrity of bombed-out buildings and determining whether they can be saved or need to be demolished. My daughter Zoe is 7. She's a bright, curious little girl who often asks me about my work. "Daddy, do you build homes for homeless children?" she asked me before my last trip. "Something like that, honey," I replied, not knowing that this would be the last normal conversation we would have for a long time. My ex-wife Rachel and I divorced 3 years ago, but we still have a good relationship because of Zoe. Rachel had always been concerned about my work in conflict zones, but she understood that my calling was to help people in desperate situations. "Just come back to our daughter in one piece," she would always say. In early March 2024, I was commissioned by the NGO Bridges of Hope to assess 3 bombed-out schools in Karava, a town of about 40,000 people that had recently been liberated after 2 years of occupation. The local government wanted to rebuild the education system as quickly as possible, and my job was to determine which structures could be restored and which would need to be demolished entirely. Karava was a ghost town when I arrived. Buildings with mortar holes, streets pockmarked by explosions, and a silence that chilled the soul. But there was hope. People were returning, children playing in the rubble, shopkeepers trying to reopen their shops. The local team was small but dedicated. There was Elena Petrov, our local coordinator, a 45-year-old woman who had lost her own school in the bombing and was determined to rebuild the education system. Also working with us were Igor Volkov, a local engineer who knew every brick and mortar of the city, and Amira Hassan, a young translator who had studied engineering before the war. Of the 3 schools I had to assess, the Central Primary School was the most damaged. It had taken a direct hit on the West Wing, but amazingly, the main structure was still standing. It was a 4-story building built in the 1960s, with thick, reinforced concrete walls, typical of Soviet architecture. Solid as a fortress, even after all it had endured. My first inspection was on March 15th. I remember the exact date because I called Zoe that evening. It was a Sunday in the States, and she was eager to tell me about a school project she was doing about heroes. "Daddy, you are my hero," she said. "When you come back, I want you to tell me stories about the children you are helping." If I had known what would happen the next day, I would never have hung up on that call. March 16th, 2024, 2:30 p.m. I was on the 3rd floor of the Central School, measuring cracks in the north wall when we heard the first plane. Elena immediately shouted in Russian, something about no more attacks. The area was supposed to be safe. The ceasefire had been signed 3 months earlier. Igor was with me on the 3rd floor, checking the damage to the ceiling. Amira was on the 1st floor, photographing the damage for our report. Elena was outside, coordinating with the city government about next steps. The sound of the planes grew louder. Igor looked at me with that expression you learn to recognize in war zones. Pure terror. "Not ours," he said in broken English. "Not ours." I ran to the window and saw 2 military fighters approaching low. Very low. My stomach dropped. 14 years of experience in conflict zones had taught me that when planes fly this low, they're not just passing by. Everyone out. Now. I screamed, but it was too late. The first missile hit the east wing. The explosion was deafening, a sound you feel in your bones before you hear it with your ears. The entire building shook like a magnitude 7 earthquake. Igor was thrown against the wall and disappeared in a cloud of dust and debris. I ran for the stairs, but the second missile hit exactly where I was. The outer wall of the 3rd floor simply disappeared. A ton of concrete and twisted iron fell on me. The last thing I remember before everything went black was the sound of the 3rd missile hitting the building. And then, absolute silence. I woke up in total darkness. Not the kind of darkness you feel when you turn off the light in your room. Absolute, oppressive darkness that seemed to have its own weight. My head throbbed like it had been hit with a hammer, and I could taste the metallic taste of blood in my mouth. I tried to move and realized I was in an awkward position, lying on my side with something heavy pressing down on my legs. As I tried to straighten up, my head hit something solid just a few inches above me. Panic. That's how it starts. That growing feeling that you're trapped, buried, maybe dead. I forced myself to breathe slowly and think rationally. I'm an engineer. I analyze collapsed structures for a living. I can do this. I began to feel around, trying to mentally map out my little concrete coffin. I was in a triangular space, created when a reinforced concrete beam had fallen at an angle against what was left of a wall. The space was about 6 feet long, maybe 3 feet wide at its widest point, and varied in height from about 16 inches where my head was to about 2 feet at my feet. My right leg was pinned beneath smaller debris, sore but not broken. My gear bag had stayed with me in the fall, a small miracle. Inside, a flashlight, extra batteries, a smartphone, no signal of course, a few power bars, a 500 milliliters bottled water, and my basic first aid kit. The flashlight revealed the terrifying reality of my situation. I was buried under at least 10 feet of rubble. Every surface around me was solid concrete or twisted iron. There was no obvious way out, but there was air. Somehow, there was a small draft of fresh air coming from somewhere above me. That meant I wasn't completely sealed. There was hope. By the second day, the reality of my situation began to set in. No one was going to come looking for me quickly. Elena had been outside when the attack happened. If she survived, she would assume Igor, Amira, and I were dead. The international rescue team, if there was one, would take days to arrive, assuming anyone knew we were here. I took careful inventory of my resources. Water was my main concern. 500 milliliters wouldn't last long. The energy bars could last me for maybe a week if I rationed them carefully. The flashlight had 4 extra AA batteries, but I needed to conserve power. I established a strict routine. Every 2 hours, timed by my watch, I would yell for help for exactly 5 minutes. After that, 15 minutes of light exercise, modified push-ups, stretches, anything to get my circulation going. Then 15 minutes of trying to expand my space, removing small pieces of debris that I could reach. The rest of the time, I thought, mostly about Zoe. On the 3rd day, I made my first major discovery. There was a small gap between 2 pieces of concrete, about 6 inches above my head. This was where the fresh air was coming from. Using a small screwdriver from my kit, I was able to remove some smaller boulders and widen the gap slightly. That was when I heard it for the first time. Papa? Papa, where are you? The voice was crystal clear, impossible to mistake. It was Zoe, my 7-year-old daughter, calling to me through the rubble. My first thought was logical. It was a hallucination. Lack of oxygen, stress, head trauma. But the voice was so real, so close. It seemed to be coming from the very small gap above me. Zoe, I called back. Zoe, is that you? Silence. I waited 15 minutes and tried again. Nothing. I began to question my sanity. On the 4th day, the voice returned. This time for longer. Papa, don't give up. I know you're there. Mama said you always come home. It was definitely Zoe. Every intonation, every little pause she made when she was thinking. It was her. But that was impossible. Zoe was in Seattle, 5,000 miles away. Honey, how did you get here? I shouted through the small opening. I'm not there, Papa, but I can hear you. You have to keep trying to get out. It made no sense at all, but at that moment it did. In some strange, inexplicable way, it did. From the 5th day on, our talk became regular. It always came through the small opening above me. Always Zoe's clear voice, and always with messages of encouragement or practical instructions. Papa, you need to drink less water. Rachel taught me about survival when you were divorced. Small sips. Papa, try moving the big rock near your left foot. There's a space behind her. Papa, don't yell so much. You're wasting your energy. I followed her every instruction, partly because they made sense, partly because hearing her voice was the only thing keeping me sane. On the 6th day, following her instructions about the big rock, I managed to create a second small space where I could stretch my legs better. I also discovered a small water leak coming from a broken pipe. Only a few drops an hour, but they were precious drops. Well done, Papa. Now you have more water. See? I knew you did. How could she know? By the 7th day, my body began to seriously deteriorate. The lack of adequate food, the confined space, and the constant humidity from the leaks began to take their toll. I developed a persistent cough, probably from breathing in concrete dust. My right leg, still partially attached, was going numb. Worse still, I began to question whether Zoe's voice was real or if I was having a complete mental breakdown. Papa, are you doubting me? Zoe, how can you hear me? How is this possible? You always told me that love doesn't follow the rules of physics, remember? When you and Mom got divorced, you said that no matter where we were, our love would always connect us. She was right. I had said exactly that to comfort her during the divorce. But that was a metaphor, honey. Maybe for you, not for me. On the 8th day, the voice gave me the most specific instruction yet. Papa, you need to stop trying to get out on top. You won't make it. The way out is down. Down? Zoe, there's no way down. I'm flat on the ground. No, Papa, you're on the 3rd floor. Remember? The ground you're on isn't the real ground. It's the ceiling of the 2nd floor that's fallen in. There's another space beneath you. My blood ran cold. She was right. In the confusion and darkness, I had assumed I was at ground level. But she was right. I had fallen with the debris from the 3rd floor to the 2nd. I began to pound on what I thought was the solid ground beneath me. In some spots, the sound was different, more hollow. Keep pounding, Papa. More to your left. I followed her instructions and found a spot where the concrete sounded definitely hollow. Using my screwdriver and small pieces of twisted iron, I began working on a small crack. After hours of careful work, I managed to make a hole the size of a fist. When I shone my flashlight through it, I saw another space below, perhaps even larger than mine. Now you're getting close, Papa. But be careful. Don't make the hole too big too fast, or you might bring the whole thing down. On day 9, I worked methodically to expand the hole I had created. Each piece of concrete I removed had to be carefully positioned so as not to destabilize my little cave. Zoe's voice guided me with each step. Papa, that curved piece of iron might help as a lever. Papa, don't push too hard. If you make too much noise, you might cause another landslide. Papa, rest a bit. You're breathing too heavily. By day 10, the hole was big enough for me to climb through, but the descent would be a literal leap into the dark. I had no idea what awaited me below. Zoe, what if I fall and hurt myself? What if it's a worse trap than here? Papa, you have to trust me. I can see things you can't. The space below is bigger, and there's a real way out. How can you see? I can't explain it, Papa, but I can. I strapped my backpack tightly to my back, said a silent prayer, and began my descent. It was terrifying, crashing through a hole in total darkness, not knowing if there would be a floor on the other side or if I would fall 3 more stories. My feet touched solid ground after a fall of less than 6 feet. I turned on my flashlight and discovered that Zoe was right again. The space was significantly larger, an entire room that had been partially protected by a girder that had not completely collapsed. Better yet, there was evidence of other people. I was not the only survivor. Amira? Igor? I shouted. A faint voice answered from across the room. David? David, is that you? It was Amira. She was alive. Finding Amira was one of the most emotional moments of my life. She was trapped in a section of the room, injured but alive. She had a broken rib and a concussion, but she was conscious and in relatively good shape. "David, I thought you were dead," she said when I reached her. "I heard you screaming for the first few days, but then silence." I was one floor above. I managed to climb down through a hole. "How did you know there was this space down here?" It was a question I didn't know how to answer. How could I explain that my 7-year-old daughter, who was halfway around the world, had guided me through the rubble? An engineer's intuition, I lied. Amira had done her own survival analysis. She had access to more water, a major leak in a water main. She had also found some emergency supplies that had been stored at the school, a few cans of food, matches, and even a small radio that no longer worked. Most importantly, she had mapped out the space we were in. There were 3 possible exit routes, but all were blocked by debris too heavy for us to remove on our own. "But David," she said, "I heard voices outside yesterday. Rescue teams. They're looking for survivors." My heart raced. If there were rescue teams, we needed to find a way to signal our location. That night, as Amira slept, I heard Zoe's voice again. "Papa, she's right about the rescue teams. But they won't be able to get to you in time." In time for what? The building isn't stable. You've probably noticed more debris is falling every day. You have maybe 2 days before it all collapses completely. I looked around and realized she was right. Small chunks of concrete were falling periodically. Cracks in the walls had been widening since I arrived. The building was slowly self-destructing. What should we do? There's a way out, Papa, but it's dangerous, and you're going to have to trust me completely. On the 11th day, following Zoe's detailed instructions, I began investigating a section of the wall that she insisted was different from the others. "Papa, knock on the wall exactly 5 feet to the right of the big crack." I knocked. The sound was definitely different, more hollow. Now measure down 80 centimeters and knock again. Same hollow sound. "Papa, that wall isn't a real wall. It's a partition that was built a long time ago. Behind it is a service corridor that leads to the outside of the building." "How can you know that?" "Papa, stop asking how I know. Just trust me. You two need to leave today." I told Amira about my theory that there was a corridor behind the wall. She was skeptical, but agreed that we didn't have many options. We worked together to carefully remove part of the partition. It was slow and dangerous work. Each blow could potentially destabilize our secure area. After 6 hours of careful work, we managed to make an opening large enough to fit through. My flashlight revealed exactly what Zoe had described: a narrow service corridor cluttered with pipes and electrical wires, but crucially, with less debris. "Papa, follow the hallway to the end. There's an emergency staircase that leads directly outside." "Zoe, if this doesn't work..." "It will, Papa, but you need to go now." The ceiling is starting to cave in. As if in answer to his words, we heard a loud creak above us, followed by the falling of more debris. Amira looked at me fearfully. "David, we have to go. Now." The 12th day began with the terrifying sound of concrete structures crumbling above us. The building was literally self-destructing, and our escape window was closing fast. Amira and I crawled through the opening we had made in the partition and entered the service corridor. It was narrow, dark, and full of obstacles, but it was a way out. "Papa, watch out for the loose electrical wire about 10 feet ahead," Zoe's voice warned me. I warned Amira, and she looked at me strangely. "How did you know about the wire?" I saw a spark. I lied again. The corridor seemed to stretch on forever. Every few feet, we had to navigate around debris that had fallen through the ceiling. My flashlight was running low, the batteries finally running out after 12 days of careful use. "Papa, another 20 feet. The ladder is right there." Zoe was right again. Through the darkness, my dying flashlight illuminated what was clearly an emergency staircase, steep and partially blocked, but passable. "Amira, there's a staircase here." We began to climb. Each step was a struggle, Amira with her broken rib, me with 2 weeks of malnutrition and confinement. But there was a cool breeze from above. Fresh air, the smell of freedom. "Papa, I can hear you outside. Yell for help when you reach the top." We reached what appeared to be an emergency exit door. It was partially blocked by debris, but we managed to push it open enough to create an opening. Sunlight, real bright, warm sunlight on my face for the first time in 12 days. "Help!" There are people here. Help! We shouted together. Within minutes, we heard voices responding in English. Hello, where are you? Keep talking. It was an international rescue team. They had arrived 3 days ago and were systematically searching for survivors. When they finally managed to pull us completely out of the rubble, I saw what was left of the central school for the first time. It was unrecognizable, a mountain of broken concrete and twisted iron. The fact that we had survived was literally miraculous. Sir, how long have you been trapped? Asked the leader of the rescue team, an Englishman called Captain Williams. 12 days. 12 days? That's incredible. How did you survive that long? How could I explain? How could I tell him about my daughter's voice guiding me through the darkness? At the hospital in Sarajevo, where we were taken for treatment, I finally managed to call home. Rachel answered on the first ring. David? Oh my God, David. We were so worried. We haven't heard anything for 2 weeks. Rachel, I need to talk to Zoe. Where is she? She's at school, darling. But David, there's something I need to tell you about Zoe. My blood ran cold. What? What happened? For the past 12 days, she's been saying the strangest things. She kept insisting she was talking to you, that you were trapped but alive. She gave me specific details. She said you were in a small space with a diagonal beam, that there was little water, that she'd found an injured woman. My hand shook as I held the phone. Did she say anything else? David, she drew maps. Detailed maps of where you were. She'd never been to this town, never seen any blueprints, but she drew the layout of the school, the service hallways, even the emergency stairs. Rachel, that's impossible. I know it's impossible. But David, all her drawings are correct, aren't they? You came out exactly where she said you would. I was silent for a long moment. How could I explain something I didn't understand myself? Rachel, can I talk to her now? Sure, I'll pick her up from school. But David, she said something yesterday that scared me. What? She said she couldn't hear you anymore, that the connection had gone when you stepped out into the sunlight. She said that exactly when you were rescued, according to your timeline. When Zoe got on the phone, her familiar little voice made me cry for the first time in 2 weeks. Hi, Papa. I knew you'd make it out. Zoe, honey, how did you know where I was? I don't know, Papa. I just knew. When you were scared, I could feel it. When you needed help, I could see where you were. It was like a dream that wouldn't stop. Can you hear me now? No, Papa. You're safe now, so I don't need it anymore. But it was nice helping you. For a 7-year-old, it was just that. She had helped me when I needed it, and now that I was safe, the connection had naturally ended. Folks, it's been 8 months since I walked out of that rubble. I've had every medical test possible. MRIs, CT scans, psychological evaluations. Physically, I made a full recovery. Mentally, well, that's more complicated. Doctors have theories. Hallucinations caused by extreme stress. False memories created to fill in gaps in the traumatic experience. Coincidences interpreted in retrospect as supernatural. But these theories don't explain Zoe's drawings. They don't explain how she knew specific details about the structure of a building she'd never seen, in a city she couldn't even pronounce the name of. Amira has unanswered questions, too. She's asked me repeatedly how I knew about things that were impossible to know. The loose electrical wire, the exact location of the false wall, the precise timing of when we were supposed to move. David, she told me before we returned to our countries, whatever led you through that rubble, it wasn't a coincidence. Something or someone wanted us to survive. Igor wasn't so lucky. His body was found 3 days after our rescue. Elena survived. She was far enough away from the building when the missiles hit. I came back to Seattle a different person, not just because of the trauma, but because of the unanswered questions. I've always been a man of science, of logic, of applied physics. But 12 days buried alive taught me that maybe there are things in this world that can't be measured with engineering instruments. Zoe and I have a different relationship now. Closer, more intense. Sometimes she looks at me with those 7-year-old eyes, and I see a wisdom that shouldn't exist in a child her age. Papa, she said to me last week, you still don't fully believe, do you? Believe in what, honey? That love can do things that science can't explain. And you know what? She's right. I still struggle to fully accept what happened. But I can't deny the facts. For 12 days in the rubble of a bombed-out school, my daughter's voice kept me alive, guided me to safety, and literally saved me from certain death. Some of you will watch this video and think I made it all up, that it's impossible, that it violates the laws of physics, that there must be a rational explanation. Others will watch it and understand immediately. You will recognize that there are forces in this world, love, connection, the bond between parents and children, that are more powerful than anything we learn in science textbooks. I don't know which group is right. I only know that I'm alive today because a 7-year-old girl sitting in a classroom in Seattle somehow managed to reach me across 5,000 miles and tons of concrete. If you have children, hug them today. Tell them you love them, because love, true, unconditional, pure, can literally move mountains. Or at least, it can move enough rubble to save a life. Thank you for watching until the end. If this story touched you in any way, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel. And in the comments, tell me, have you ever experienced something that science can't explain? Something that only love could make possible? See you in the next video. And remember, never underestimate the power of a child who loves you. That love can be the most powerful thing in the universe.